Hi there, welcome back. And today we've got something different for a change. This is a Pioneer model SX-1050 stereo receiver. It is a beauty, and I'm confident in saying this is probably the only one on the island of Madeira, and it came to me. So it's good to be me sometimes. I love these sets. These things are very rare in Portugal. And in Madeira even more so. If you don't know, I live on the island of Madeira. We've got a population of 275,000. And if you look at the pro rata ownership of these sets, that means that Madeira deserves one unit, and I have it. Now this belongs to someone who found this after looking for it for 2 years and actually found it for sale 5 minutes from his house. Now that is really, really unusual. He has not turned it on. He's afraid to turn it on. Understand why. These things are pretty powerful, and when you turn it on, if you've got a short, the results can be quite catastrophic. So it's always a good idea to open it up, have a look inside, make sure that things look okay, and then of course when you do turn it on, make sure you've got some sort of protection. And the protection I use is a dim bulb tester, which you've probably seen on this channel before. And that way we can sort of protect against catastrophic shorts and make sure we don't do more damage than it's already possibly got. Now, as I said, he doesn't know if there's anything wrong with it. What he wants is to make sure that it's working well and also do some maintenance work on that, preventative if necessary. So we're probably looking at recapping, testing the function, a lot of cleaning of switches and potentiometers, because these things do tend to gum up after a while. We have no idea. I have no idea what this thing looks like inside. You're going to look at it at the same time as I do. Now, I by no means am trying to steal the spotlight from a fellow YouTuber called xraytonyb. xraytony, or Tony, has probably the best set of videos on this type of receiver. A lot of Pioneers. He's got 2 series on this particular model, and I am absolutely gobsmacked by the detail he puts into it. I can by no means replicate that. In fact, they are great sources of information if you're going to work on one of these. Not for the faint of heart, but let's have a closer look. The first impression one gets is that this thing is in very, very good condition cosmetically. If we look at the front here, I don't see any scratches. I don't see any fading of the labeling. It all looks very, very good. Obviously, pots and switches need some pretty intensive cleaning in there. They usually, after many years, need to get degreased and all the contacts cleaned up again. Now this thing is from I believe 76, 77. So we're looking at 40 something odd years, more than 40 years old. And look at it. Amazing. I can see some tarnishing on the black metal cover over here. The wood itself has got a couple of scratches, but they're not deep. Somebody put something round on there. I think we can actually clean this up really nicely. I like this wood finish. It comes out beautifully. There's a bit of a chip on the back here, but that's not serious. The veneer has sort of been chipped off, but we can glue it back on. The veneer is still there, which is a good thing. Now, with a bit of exercise, I'm going to flip this around and look at the back, show you the back. Starting from here, we've got 3 speaker outlets, speakers A, B, and C. These are selectable on the front cover. They do tell you to be careful with the speaker impedance. If you use A, B, or C, it's 4 ohms or more per speaker. A plus B, A plus C, or B plus C, 8 ohms or more per speaker. So these things are going out in parallel. If you use 2 of them and you're using 4 ohm speakers, you're basically presenting a 2 ohm load to the amplifier, which is not good. We have AC outlets that are switched, and the idea is that you can switch this on and it'll switch on any peripheral devices you have on here. This is switched and these are unswitched. Okay, so it just basically acts as an adapter, not very useful. The voltage selector switch input voltage selector switch, we've got 220 selected. I presume it'll allow 110 or 120 as well. I would actually like it to give us 240, but we'll see if we can get that. We do have the FM de-emphasis switch here. 75 microseconds, 50 microseconds, and 25 microseconds. Now this will be different between the States and Europe. I believe the States is 75, this is set to 50, which I think is correct. FM detector out 4 channel. This would be to connect to a peripheral device. That's also for the adapter, and I think that adapter is connected to that. As I said, not sure. If we look down here, we've actually got a bridge between the preamp out and the power in. Now this is great because if you have a problem, if it doesn't work, you can effectively remove these bridges, test the signal coming in, or rather you feed a signal in and see if it comes out of your preamp. If it comes out of your preamp, then you know your preamp's okay. If it doesn't come out of your preamp, then you feed a signal into here and you know whether your power amp is okay. So effectively, you've got that option. These things are removable. And here we get to this is the record and play tape input in the DIN socket. Record and play RCA sockets. This is tape 2. Tape 1, you have record as well and you have play. This thing has a duplicate function, so you can play on one tape and record on another. In the old days, that used to be a big thing. Then we've got 2 phono inputs. We've got 2 grounds on there, and we've got 1 auxiliary input, and this will be line level. This tape 1 will also be line level, and that I believe will be line level. So you've basically got 3 amplifier inputs if you want to use a CD player or MP3 player or whatever. Usually you would use the auxiliary, but you need another one. You can probably go to the tape and just check the levels. Now here we've got a ferrite antenna, which is sort of flexible and you can move it around, get the right orientation, and the separate or specific antenna inputs. 75 ohm unbalanced for FM. You can use that balanced antenna, 300 ohm, the 2 connectors, and then you've got an AM antenna and it's ground on here as well. And that's the back, folks. That's it. It's all in very good cosmetic condition so far. And there's one thing I've just noticed, which is good. I've just noticed here that it says AC 110, 120, 220, and 240. Which means that this selector switch probably has another position here for 240 volts. That's the one I'll want to put it into, because we are now looking at, in our main system, it's no longer 220, it's more 235, well, between 230 and 240. So if we put it on 240, we're playing it safe. If we leave it at 220, we could end up with a 10% higher voltage than this thing wants to see. No point in stressing it if you've got the option. And it pulls 870 watts. Now, this is the thing. 870 watts, I presume, and I'm sure that's right, would be at full power output. Now, at full power output, well, if you got 870 watts at 240 volts, that's 4 amps. If you've got it at 120, it's like 8 amps. So this thing draws a fair amount of current, and that will be important when we test it with a dim bulb tester. I'm not sure that when we switch it on with the dim bulb tester, that this thing will actually have enough voltage being seen by the unit to allow the protection circuit to kick in. In other words, for the relays to kick in. Because when we look inside, you'll see this thing's got some pretty hefty capacitors. And the dim bulb tester with the bulbs in place, even if all of them are in other words, if we've got, 200 watt bulb, a 200 watt bulb will allow a maximum of sort of 1 amp, just under 1 amp. If that's too much restriction, this thing might take quite a while to charge up. So we'll see when we test it, and I'm going to test it. Let me open it up and show you what we've got inside, what condition it's in. Well, this is what I did. I took off 2 screws on this side, 2 screws on that side. The cover sort of pulls back and up and it just comes out. I noticed a lot of dust. I did one clean up here because I wanted to see whether that was a bulge or not. It's not. Let me explain. All I can see here, as far as a quick visual inspection is concerned, is dust. I don't see signs of anybody having been in here. I don't see signs of any repair. And that, my friends, is very good news. If you've messed with one of these or any kind of audio equipment, it's always best when you're the first one in there, because if there's a problem, then the original problem's still there and you don't have further problems created by someone who may not have known what they were doing. So what I can see here, I'm looking at this end, I'll show you in a second. I'm just trying to decide whether I should be happy or not, and I am. I don't see any intervention, any change of components at all. So it looks like we're going to have a virgin set to work with. Let's have a closer look. So as you can see, the dust is quite abundant, but I'm not afraid of dust. I'm afraid of cocked up repairs. But basically what we've got here is we've got the two big filter caps. These, I believe, are 80,000 microfarads. I believe that's right. Anyway, they are huge, and when you switch this thing on, it draws an enormous amount of current. So what they've got is they've got a soft start circuit where there's a resistor in series to start, and then as the voltage builds up on the capacitors, there's a relay that shorts out that resistor. Now, over here we've got the power section. We've got 8 power transistors down there. And I've looked at the schematic, and I've worked on a couple of these before, not Madeiran. They came in from overseas, actually from the mainland. So I remember there are 2 or 4 transistors per channel, and it's 2 in parallel, and so on. So this is the power transistor section on the heatsink. These are actually connected on with those plugs to the driver board, which is that thing over there. And again, fair amount of dust everywhere. But these boards actually come out fairly easily, and it's probably the first thing I'm going to do is remove the power section. After testing it, of course, I'm sort of hoping this thing works. And that needs to be redone. The transistors will be removed and a new thermal compound put in, checked, and so on and so forth. And then of course we've got a power supply section over there with a lot of electrolytic capacitors, and they're all original. They were very, very good quality caps. They were ulnar caps at the time, but these things have been drying out for 40 years, and this thing gets really hot over here. So if you know, heat and capacitors side by side are not a good thing. So these caps will have dried out somewhat, and they will definitely be changed. I'm hoping that these two are fine, because these two are pretty difficult to get hold of and expensive. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. Now on top here, what we have is that there would be the soft start relay, a protection circuit. Now here we have a couple more electrolytics. This would be the tuner section, is it? Yeah. Over here and over there. The dial string is still on, which is good. The panel lamps are there. I'm not sure if these are same as, yeah, they're the usual. Probably, and there's more dial lamps in the bottom there. One of the things that I'll probably do is replace that with LEDs. We'll see. The chassis needs a pretty good cleanup, as well as the boards, but as I said, that's not scary. Now I'm going to flip this thing on its side. I won't flip it over because this thing is very difficult to handle. It's heavy. I'll flip it on its side, remove the bottom cover, and show you what we're facing there. Okay, this thing is big. Just pan from the top to bottom, show you what we're talking about. The power transformer is on the bottom there behind that metal section. And what have we got? If we go over here, we can see the connection between the driver board and the transistors. The transistor section. These transistors are actually TO3 devices, and they're actually socketed, so it makes it a lot easier to remove them and clean them up. Again, I don't see anything dramatic over here. I don't see any intervention. I do see electrolytic capacitors down there. There aren't that many on this board, but there are a few. And of course that supply board is on the top end of this. This is the bottom of that board. So this will have to be removed to replace those caps. The bottom of the two filter caps is here. So we can check them for value in ESR when we've drained them properly. This thing holds, I believe it's about 70 volts or 65 volts plus and minus. So you do have to be careful. It can zap you. It will zap you. And a few more caps down there. And then of course we've got all the difficult ones to get to. These boards over here, there's two tiers of boards over there. To get to the bottom one, you've got to remove the top one, and to remove them you've got to remove the front panel, and you've got to be careful that you don't break any of these wire wrapped connectors. If you haven't seen wire wrapping before, this is what it is. It's these prongs come out and you wrap wire on there. It's not soldered. I've been looking for soldered wire wraps on there. I don't see any. And that usually tells us that nobody's opened this up. The first thing you notice, or you'll notice if you see someone has removed a board, is that they very seldom have the wire wrap tools to do the proper wrapping on here. So they'll solder it on. Nothing wrong with that, but it does tell you that it's been operated on. Now these guys need to be removed because all the pots and switches are on this side and they then connect to those boards. So to clean them properly, you have to remove them. And that is not fun. Now, anything with this much wire visible is not fun. But what I can say about these sets is that they routed them pretty well. All the wiring has been harnessed properly, as you can see. And this is another indication that perhaps nobody's been here, because usually when they have, the harnesses are a bit of a mess. These are immaculate, or as immaculate as they can be when you need 1,000 wires running around. So, I'm ready to turn this around and I'm ready to switch it on. I'm a bit afraid, but I'm ready. Which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to prepare it and see what happens. So I'm ready to do a quick first power up and test. This is off, volume is down, speaker A is activated. That's what I've connected the speakers to. I have it plugged into the dummy load. I've got two light bulbs active, so a 40 watt and a 60 watt. That means this thing has got a 100 watt light bulb in series with it. It is off at the moment. The limit function is on. If you've seen the video on the way I've built this, you'll know how this works. Now I've got the power off on the unit, so I'm going to give it power. This is going through a isolation transformer as well. Gives it a bit more safety. The speakers, this is connected to the speaker set A, go to my dummy load speaker switcher. I've got speaker on. I won't connect a scope for now. I want to see if we get something. So I'm going to flick the switch, the on-off switch, and when we do that, I want to look at the light bulbs and see what happens. Fine, I've got the signal generator going in, feeding a signal, a tone, into both the left and the right speaker. I've got auxiliary selected. Let's see what we get. We're getting it on both speakers. Very scratchy, as you can tell, but we're getting it on both speakers. Now, if I put mono, I'm getting it on both speakers. So this mono stereo function is only not working for radio, especially the AM and the FM as well, but it's for radio. So noisy, but there. Scratchy as well. Okay, fair enough. Let's see what happens with this. It's actually coming back properly now. That doesn't come back. See, now one side's come back, the right hand side is not come back. Yeah, these switches are all messed up. You can tell. All right, that one's fine. Loudness, fine. Tone. Well, this thing's not going to give me much because I'm putting a 500 ohm tone through there. Well, they seem to be okay. These are noisy. See, I've just hit that filter. When it came out, it didn't bring the sound back. Sound's gone. So, there it is. So, a lot of cleaning of switches. And this one is so stiff, it's unreal. This is the power. This thing has to be degunked badly. And it's actually slightly bent. Yeah, this one's slightly bent to the right. So we have to try very, very carefully bring that back. This again, muting with clicks and hisses as well. So I think we know where most of the work's going to be. To keep things logical, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the power supply board over there. I'm going to do the power amp boards, the drivers, the actual transistors, get those all cleaned up, make sure there's no noisy capacitors and leaky capacitors or bad connectors and so on and so forth. And I'm going to work backwards. In other words, I'm going to work from the output to the input. And the first input will be the auxiliary. Make sure that that goes through noise-free. And once we know that the auxiliary input is clean, then we can get to the radio section. And the reason is that obviously the auxiliary input basically just switches off the other sources and brings in the tone that you're feeding at the back. And it means that every source that you have here, the phono 1, phono 2, AM and FM, all use the auxiliary forward. In other words, the auxiliary power forward. So if you basically work backwards, you can then sort of isolate where the problems are. We know we've got a lot of problems with the switching. What I'm probably going to do is when I open these up and clean out the switches, I'm not sure that the caps have got a problem in there, but I'll probably recap it as well. There are a few exceptions, and if you look at xraytonyB's series, you'll notice, and he'll tell you, there are some capacitors here that are immaculate and very, very good quality in the audio path. If they don't need changing, they don't need changing. Anything that sees power on it, anything that sees higher voltage on it, those tend to dry up and you need to replace them. And that's what I'll be doing. The type of components that you use here, he also does this. I use Nishikons a lot. I use some Panasonics. So very, very good quality capacitors. Don't skimp on the value of capacitors. I mean, the difference between a cheap capacitor and a good capacitor is not that much that you should worry about saving, a few cents. This thing, once you get this thing recapped properly and reset properly, this thing should last another 40 years. And if it doesn't, hopefully it'll be something else that you haven't touched, but if you do something, do it right, because these things are not easy to open, and you shouldn't be opening this a lot. Every time you open something like this, well, you're changing stuff, and that's not good.